Hello, my name is Derek Young, President of YMG Enterprises, LLC, and welcome to the C-Seat. What we do here at the C-Seat is we talk with C-level leaders from around the area about the topic of culture. In our organization, we believe that culture really is the key, it's the gateway to establishing long-term success and long-term profitability. So what we want to do in this program through our partnership with the Master of Organizational Leadership program here at Trevecca University is we want to really help you see what real-life leaders think about the importance of culture. Today I'm joined by Hannah Paramore, who is the CEO of Paramore Digital, and she's going to share with us her perspectives on culture. Hannah, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. You know, besides talking a little bit about your organization and what your organization is all about, I really want to start off with something I noticed on your website. The first word I saw, top left corner of your website, is the word culture.
That's right. It's the first piece of navigation on our website.
That's right.
That's right.
Talk about that a little bit.
Well, culture, it's a hot topic these days, and it's important. I think it's important to try to define culture, but in an organization, but not too early in a company. I think culture develops over time. Mm-hmm. You can't pick up a newspaper or go to a website basically without hearing about millennials and the change that millennials are making on our culture.
Sure.
And it's true. I have a company of 30 people. Most of them are millennials. Mm-hmm. It's been an interesting, we've been in business about 13 years. So it's been interesting to see that culture develop over time. I do think that it starts with the leader of the company.
Sure.
Because if you own the company, which I do, you can't have a company culture that is different from really you.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, culture starts from the top. It has to be built throughout an organization and supported through an organization, but it starts from the top. So your company's not going to be a whole lot different from what your personality is.
Right.
And it shouldn't be. I mean, it is what I do with my life. Mm-hmm. I should be consistent. I think culture comes from consistency. It comes from both yeses and nos.
Yep.
This is I think there's a fallacy. There's probably a belief that culture is almost always yes.
Right.
Well, culture is not always yes.
Sure.
Culture is that we behave this way, we don't behave this way.
That makes sense. At some level, can you really even have a culture until there is some level of disagreement, there's some level of conflict, if you will? You talked about having a company of about 30 people. Mm-hmm. A lot of times, I think when people think of culture, they think of massive companies, your IBMs, your Fortune 500 companies. But why is culture so important even with a group of 30 people?
It might be more important because when you're only 30 people, you have to, especially in a dynamic, creative sort of environment, everybody has to be really bought into where you're going.
Right.
We're a for-profit business, and I think that the first priority of business is to stay in business. Mm-hmm. All right. So it's a lot of people will say, my first priority is to please the client. And I'm like, that's not true.
Right.
The first priority of business is to stay in business because you can't please a client if you can't stay in business. Yep. Right. So, I have this concept of businesses and organizations and educational institutions and service providers across the country, across the world, really having a place. Like, what is the place in our society that you fill?
Sure.
And for-profit businesses are supposed to make money so that we can have health care, we can have parks, we can have education, and we can have sidewalks and that kind of thing.
Yep.
Well, if you don't have people in a company of 30 people that really understand that everything they do affects the bottom line, then you're going to have a huge problem.
Right.
So building a culture that's consistent through a small to mid-sized company, I think is more important than even one in a big company. Big companies, there are some jobs that are really just you push things along. They're more, they kind of check in, check out, and go home, and it's a different kind of thing.
Exactly.
We don't have that.
Right. Let me ask you about this, because I know this is what I see with a lot of our clients. Sometimes there is there's just a challenge that they have between trying to be profitable and really understanding why culture is the gateway to profitability.
Right.
It's a challenge I found. How have you seen that in your career?
So it's particularly a challenge at budget time because you do look at those budget line items, like how much you actually spend on things that are culture related.
Yep.
And how much you spend trying to keep a team together. And we have yoga in the office on Mondays at 1:30. We have ping pong tables. We used to have dogs in the office, which is a great example of how a strength taken too far becomes a weakness.
Right.
Because 1 dog is a good idea, 2 dogs is okay, 9 dogs is a whole other thing.
That's a different business.
It's a whole that's exactly right.
Right.
It's a kennel. We had a dog one time who used to pee on one of our clients' feet every time she would come in the door.
Okay,
You would just go mark her, But I should have known when we had to chain the hound dog to a desk.
Right.
It's a little too far.
That's
So
hilarious.
yeah, it should be written. It really should be, because it got ridiculous. We had management meetings about what to do with the dog sign-up sheet. I'm like, well, we're not. No, we're not going to have a dog sign-up sheet.
That is funny.
So that is so it is hard for an owner. It's kind of hard to face that when you have to go through budgeting and you're like, yes, we're going to spend X number of thousands of dollars on a company retreat. But I will tell you that the company retreat, which is like that, and the core values are the cornerstones of our culture. That sets up our next year.
See, Hannah, we live in a society, we live in a culture, and especially for businesses, where everybody wants to be able to measure everything to the nth degree. I almost find myself fighting with some of our clients to say, you just have to trust me. These things have a payoff. So what have you been able to do to sort of keep that at the forefront of your mind?
Well, it's a long-term versus a short-term mentality.
Yeah.
And honestly, the digital industry has not done us very many favors in that regard, because I've been in digital since the late 90s, since it was new. And we said it's fast, easy, and cheap. And we're better than traditional because you can measure everything and you can do it fast, and you can change it if it doesn't work. So it's created a culture and an expectation, even with our own clients, that they can make short-term decisions. We can know quickly. We can change it next week. We can change it this afternoon. And often the people will either misunderstand a result, or judge a result way too early, and so they'll make decisions way too fast to make a change in something. Well, it's the same thing with your culture. So the first time we do an annual retreat every year, we've done it for 7 or 8 years, and that's about right for a company that's 13 years old. It takes a little while for you to settle in and even figure out what you're doing. Right. There's a form, norm, storm, reform sort of cycle, that businesses go through. You're kind of becoming, and then you're that for a while, and then you hit some kind of crisis, and you're storming for a while. Like, what am I? Are we even in the right business?
Why are we here?
Do we have the right people? How are we going to stay in business? And then you reform, and then you hit another norm. And so it takes a little while for your culture to start to settle in, but things that cornerstone things like a corporate retreat, really do help you with that. But if you try to do the ROI on our company retreat the first 2 or 3 years, you would have said, I'm angry at the end of this company retreat, because it brings up a lot of conflict, and people get drunk, and people act up, and you see all these personality issues coming out, and then you're like, what am I doing? Why are we here? But the long-term impact of a day and a half together like that, where you really work hard to keep communicating where we're going and why we're going there, and the core values of a company, and you try to model behavior, and but the long-term value of that is invaluable.
Sure,
it is, but it usually doesn't equate to something in the short term. In fact, I was just writing a presentation that I'm giving this weekend, and I'm ending it with a session with a talk about strategy sessions, and the fact that I sit in so many strategy sessions that are so bad. They've got the wrong people in the room. They're talking about the wrong things. Nobody's talking about the thing that a strategy session should be talking about, which I think, and I'm going to think about this a little bit longer before I believe that in a strategy session, you really shouldn't be talking about anything that you can do in less than a year. If it's less than a year, it's really a tactic. It's not a strategy.
Right.
And so strategic thinking, even around your company culture, it's not going to pay off in that first year.
Yep.
You've got to build that and nurture that and test it.
Yep.
Not every idea you have is a great idea.
That's exactly right. You're bringing up a topic that I think is really critical: strategic thinking. One of the things I know the Master of Organizational Leadership program at Trevecca wants to do is they want to make sure that their graduates understand and can execute on this notion of strategic thinking. From your vantage point, how important is that for a person who's earning a master's, or a person who's maybe looking at new career opportunities, that ability to be able to literally just do strategic thinking?
Well, strategic thinkers they're absolutely irreplaceable in businesses. But I think that there's a difference between people who we call strategic thinkers and the fact that everybody needs to work strategically.
Right.
Okay, so there's a danger in having a title, one person in a company, and we do have one. We have a guy who's a director he's director of strategy. When we did that first, probably 6 years ago, maybe, was the time that we first had a strategy person. It's easy for a small company to kind of give it up. Well, I don't have to think about strategy.
Right.
He's the strategy guy.
That's covered
strategy
now.
guy's right over there.
Right.
And so we're done now, right? Well, it's not true. I think you have to teach strategic thinking and over and over and over at every level of the organization. If you've got a guy in the company who is the strategy guy, he's going to be the strategy guy on longer term strategy for the company and for your clients.
Sure.
That doesn't mean that he does all the strategic work that there is.
Bingo.
But for folks to be able to get some exposure to what truly strategic thinking is, early in their career, and through finishing their masters, I think it's really it'd be a real advantage to them in the workplace.
Yep.
And I do think that there are some people, like I mentioned earlier, they don't work at my company, but there are some people who are just process-oriented people, and our world needs them.
Right, and may always be process.
They will always be process-oriented people.
Right.
They won't ever, no matter how good they are at running a process, they won't ever be able to step up and see a broader view of why this process.
Yep.
What are we trying to do with this?
Yep.
And there are some people who are better than that than others, but I think that almost everybody can be taught at some level of strategic thinking.
What you're saying is something I totally agree with. Every company typically has a CFO, but you don't limit budgeting, you don't limit financial stewardship just to the CFO, right? A lot of companies have a safety person. Well, you don't limit the safety to that person. So I totally agree with that concept. As you think about your company, how has your focus on, your understanding of, and your commitment to culture maybe differentiated you in the space you're in?
I think because I'm in the digital industry, we're known, the industry is known to be hip, and cool, and culture is expected. And so they think, honestly, when they come in, they think that culture is pizza, and beer.
Right.
They think that culture is ping pong tournaments and having dogs in the office and celebrations. So we do a lot of celebrations. We are a celebration oriented company, and I'm happy about that. I mean, it's almost like I created a place where I could live out my own fantasy. We create parties so that I can wear amazing dresses to the party.
That's
good. It's
That's
good.
That's strategic.
That's strategic, right? But I think that the expectation of what culture is different from what culture really is. So we have a set of 9 core values, which are the basis. That and the company retreat are the basis of our culture. So I think our culture is of high accountability.
That's good.
And so when people come in, if they are not, that is one of the 9 core values is personal responsibility.
Okay.
And that is the one that is the most defining. It's the one that's the most consistent throughout our people. And if somebody comes into the company that doesn't have a high level of personal responsibility, they will not stay very long.
That's good.
It does not matter how good their skills are, how much you like them. If they are not holding up their end of the deal, and it's about personal responsibility, the team will out them. The team will know it before I will know it.
That's good.
So it differentiates, our culture differentiates us in that we are fun, we are fun. So there are definitely types of people who don't want to go and work at a bank. You know, there are some banks who are differentiating their culture from other banks.
Sure.
You know, I believe that there are people who are suited for small business and people who are suited for big business.
I agree with that.
And the difference, I've seen it play out in my company, is that if you're a person who's really suited for big business, you're the kind of person who is more comfortable taking a lot of time researching answers to a problem, you know, enjoys the long meeting, you know, the longer time frame between start and finish.
Yep.
Slower pace. Well, listen, I want to stand beside your desk and we're going to talk about it for about 15 seconds. We're going to make a decision and we're going to move forward. It's rare in our company to have a meeting that's longer than 20 minutes.
Yep.
I mean, what else do you have to say? I mean, if you're direct in the way you communicate, it shouldn't take you very long.
I agree.
You know? And our set of core values, our 9 core values, help us make decisions. They're things like transparency. You know, our clients will always know how we bill, what our markup is, you know, what we charge for our services. We strive to make a sound profit while being fair with our rates.
Right.
So that says, if a media person is asked by a client if they can see the invoices directly from the media company that we bought from, they don't have to come and ask me that.
Right.
They don't even have to think about that. Of course you can.
And especially what strikes me about what you just said, what we teach is that you want your culture to be so strong and clear that people can look from a distance and go, either I want part of that or that is not for me.
That's exactly right. And it starts with the way you behave, and then it is communicated through the visual expression of your brand. It's communicated through the events that you sponsor. It's communicated by the clothes that you wear. It is, in fact, it's communicated by the decisions that you make. In fact, this was probably one of the biggest compliments I've ever received from a client. It happened earlier this year. I had committed to go and be a part of a 2 or 3 day strategy session at our client's location, which is in West Virginia. And that's a long drive, and it's not something that was in our scope of work that was like, this is a critical, this is a critical meeting for them. I'm the president of the company, so they asked if I would come. We made it to the short list of a piece of new business that was out west, and the final presentations were during that time that I had committed to be at the clients.
Gotcha. And
my business development director, who is very good friends with the client, called and said to them, it came up in conversations somehow between the two of them that we had this conflict, but that I would, you know, and he actually, that's right, he emailed me and said, listen, I know, I hear about this conflict. If you feel like you need to not come, I will completely understand. Okay. And I emailed him back really quickly, and I said, I committed to you first, I'll be there. And he emailed me back, and he said, that is consistent with your core values and with your culture.
That's what you want.
And that is what you want, because our core values tell us how to behave. They help us make decisions, and that sets the culture of a company. So you can't say that we are a company of personal responsibility and of transparency and of respect for the individual, and that we honor our clients, that we have brilliant finishes, that we believe in 100% delivery, that we believe in doing the right things, that we believe in doing the work right. You know, you can't say those things and then not do them, because if you do, then you will lose people, because what drives people crazy is trying to believe a lie.
Right.
You know, and consistency, I think, is the thing that establishes your culture. If you are inconsistent with your core values, if you make plans and never execute them, then you don't have a culture that people will trust.
That's really good. And you said this earlier. You talked about how the culture is really sort of set by the leadership. And as we started to talk about the difference between a big company and a smaller company, I think that too is that much more important the smaller your organization is, because the people can see you.
There is nowhere to hide.
There's nowhere to hide. So think about the shockwave that sent through your team, because those type decisions happen at every level in the organization.
Every level.
You know, and one of the things you talked about earlier with one of the stories you shared with me, it made me think about something I think is really key, and that is, I think you really sort of find out what your true culture is when things are tough. Obviously, America went through a pretty rough time, 08, 09, 2010. that really shook a lot of things loose, if you will. Talk about that from maybe the perspective as a CEO, but also as someone who works with other companies.
Sure. Well, I agree with you. So it's easy to feel good about working somewhere when money is good and you're having lots of parties, everybody gets a big bonus at the end of the year.
Right.
It's easy to feel good about that. When there's conflict, though, which often comes when there is a financial crisis at the business, when that happens, you find out who's with you, you find out what you really are like to work with.
Yep.
You find out whether you really believe that you have a company that's worth fighting for.
Right.
And this is one of the toughest lessons that I've learned maybe in the last 6 years of the business, because the first 6 or 7 years, all you do is grow. I mean, we're in an industry that's growing. There's almost no excuse for us, to not. There was no excuse for us to not grow. So we were growing 30%, 50%, 100% a year, for the first 6 or 7 years, maybe 8 years. And then the recession hit, and it didn't hit us for a while. It took a couple years for it to really kind of get to us. But it definitely did, because it got to our clients. All right? So our clients' budgets all of a sudden, got tighter. What I noticed most was that it took longer for clients to do everything. It took longer for them to decide, to sign off on a budget. It took longer for them to get through every project, because the pressure on every dollar was so much more.
Certainly.
And so for a business, you've probably heard this saying in real estate that the best answer is yes, but the second best answer is a really quick no. Right? So it's the middle ground. It's the maybe, it's the dragging the feet that really is the death to small business, because you're staffing for the yes, but they're acting like it's a no.
That's right.
And so that is hard. So what I've seen, though, is since then is that businesses definitely go through cycles. So we are a completely independently owned business. I'm the only owner of the business. And so when you are doing $5 or $6 million in business, you're staffed for that.
Right.
When you lose one of those clients, if it's a significant client, you rarely have the replacement client teed up.
Just
right
waiting
there,
in the wings.
not waiting.
That's right.
So there is a gap period.
Yes.
That gap period is painful because it's emotional to lose a client. One that you will lose them. In fact, I have a good friend who owns a business here in David Bohan, who said you start losing a client the day you sign them. And it's so true.
Right.
And I think that the agency relationship, typical agency relationship, is about 18 months
18
now.
to 24. Yeah.
So we're fortunate that we have clients that we've worked with for years and years and years. It's a blessing.
That is a blessing.
But it's not the norm, So when you do lose a client, that there is that gap period, and that gap period is it's stressful for the people who are on that client. For me as the business owner, and if you are judging just by the numbers right then, if that's how you run your business, and I have a very, very solid grasp on the numbers of my business. I could recite them to you right now. But if you make all of your decisions based on just those numbers rather than your gut and the culture and the people, you would lay off a bunch of people and then try to get them back 3 months later when you got that replacement client. And that is hard. So the way we've learned to manage through that is, I have a breakdown every January. Everybody knows it.
Everybody knows it's on the schedule.
They call
it's
the January,
coming, everybody.
and everybody knows it. They call it the January meltdown. And because it's then when you are really facing, we're an LLC, so we zero out the company basically in December every year.
Right.
But you got to start that baby right back up. It's like, I feel like Santa Claus on about the 20th of December. Everybody gets the bonus check.
That's funny.
We got the Christmas party. I love everybody. And by about January 4th, I want to fire them all, and I want all that money back.
It's like, give it back, line them up. That's right.
That's right, because we're going to have to borrow some money or something in January. It's really, but that is where the transparency of that, we have almost always been an open book company from the beginning, basically. And that has two sides to it, because if you have the wrong people and you open the books, then they will say, "Oh, I'm not getting paid more."
What
Whoa,
about
yeah, you spent what? So it's but if you have a culture of transparency, which is one of our 9 core values, we talk about the impact of losing a client. We talk about our decisions and what we're going through. I try to be encouraging but realistic. Because here's the thing. I grew up in corporate America. So back in the 80s, the early 90s, I had the benefit of going to things like Stephen Covey's Principle-Centered Leadership, like for that week-long training, which was one of the things that, it was awesome. At that time, it was some thinking that I had not been exposed to. I didn't go to business school. I started a business because I kept losing my job, and I was a classical piano major in college. So what was that going to do for me?
There you go.
So my parents weren't professional people, so I didn't have this as a background or anything. So I had to learn it.
Right.
And I became very convicted that a few years ago that a small company is not going to be able to send, we got to get some work out the door. So it's hard for us to send employees to something like that type of week-long training. But somebody is going to train those people. And I have got to give them that to create loyalty, to help them. I mean, you create loyalty when you sow into people, when you help them develop, when you're a good person to work for, when you have good work, when you have a great work environment. Those are the things that breed loyalty. And loyalty is stability for a company like us. So when we hit the tough times, we just communicate more. It's like more important to communicate. I am always surprised at how hard it is to communicate consistently and enough with people, because people hear you from wherever they are in their life that day. They may be completely focused on something else. They may be worried about something. They may have just lost their boyfriend. Their child may be homesick. They're somewhere else. You have to keep saying it over and over and over and over.
That is really a good point. We do a session called Preparing Your Team to Master Change. That's a workshop we do for our clients. And we hit on two of the things you just said. We hammer the point. But one of the other things that strikes me about a culture is giving people the chance to respond to what you've told them. And really, to your point, making sure that they heard the message you wanted to deliver. Right? And something you said is making me want to ask you a question. Something that I say all the time is that, unfortunately, in my opinion, there are 3 ways that companies actually make money. And we all know some people's number one goal is making money no matter how they do it. The first one for me is dignifying people, which obviously for me is the way to go. That's the best way to do it. But the other 2 are what I call dominating and deceiving, right?
Yeah.
Sadly, you can make money like that. So
for a while you can.
When you think about that, how does that fit in this whole discussion of culture? Because it's a reality we have to deal with.
Yeah. So again, I think that does come from the top. It comes from the business owner. I had a realization a few years ago, which was that I'm not going to pay all these people and do all the work too. All right, that doesn't make any sense at all, right? But I realized that at the same time that I was seeing people just really, really grow in their careers. If they are better at their jobs, my life is easier.
You bet.
It's like that silly question, would you rather surround yourself with smart people or dumb people? I want smart people. I think smarter clients are better clients. That's another one of the things that we focus on is teaching our clients to be better clients. So we want them to know more about digital. We don't hide. We don't hide what we're doing. We don't hide our strategies or our strategic thinking behind something that so when you have a culture like that, people feel dignified. They are dignified because they are given opportunity to excel.
Yep.
And you want people who want that because it makes your life easier. Yep. It makes your product better. It makes your company a better place to work. You have better clients.
That's right.
There is no sense. I am not I'm not a power hungry person by any means. I have plenty of control over my own life, and I have plenty of responsibility because with great control comes great responsibility also. So I don't have to have all the answers in the room. I don't usually have the best ideas in the room anymore, There was a time when I did.
Right.
And as I have grown, as the company has grown, my role has really changed to be one of encouraging people, setting vision and direction. There are only 5 things on my job description. I set vision and direction. I'm the face of the company. I grow and mentor the leadership team. I manage the financials. I mean, there's 4 things on my job description.
Right.
That's it.
Yep.
And everybody else's job description comes from mine. So the vice president's job, their main job, is to grow and mentor the directors.
Right.
You know, because if we don't cascade that down through the organization, then you end up with 1 or 2 rock stars, and that is not a company. You know, a company is a group of people that consistently deliver quality service and product in the same manner, and they have a good time, and they love each other, and you have good client relationships, and you know, it's that consistency is what creates a company.
Yep, I agree. So beyond 2 things I want to ask you. One is, when is the book coming out? And the reason I say that is, it's not so much that you're just so resolute in what you're saying, but you've got the fruit on the tree. Because I think in so many instances, and again, I'm going to stick back to that point of those people who are so focused on money, so focused on earnings per share, so focused on profitability, that they just sort of say, you know, who cares about this culture stuff? That I'm always looking for those models that we can show folks. There is a way to do this where you win with the people and you win right in with your purse, with your pocketbook, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Ban a book, but wouldn't that be fun? I will say something about what you just said, though. I want to comment about that. We pay a lot. We pay a lot of money in rent. I mean, we do. We have a nice office space. We spend a lot of money, like you mentioned earlier, at doing things that enable the culture and enhance the culture. We have great parties. We have people who make good money. I make more money than I ever thought that I would make in my life. If a CEO, I'm going to throw out a number which is dangerous. This is not what I make, but say you're a CEO who makes $500,000 a year.
Right.
If all it took to really incent and reward your VPs was $50,000 of that, what difference would it make to you?
Right.
At the end of the day, what difference would it really make to you? If I get to work in a beautiful place, work around the people that I want, if they are happy, when I hear, the most gratifying thing for me as a CEO of this business is when I hear the things that I have said repeated by them, not because they want to suck up to me, but because they are using it to make a business decision. They're applying it to a customer's problem. They're saying it to each other. They're saying, we need a brilliant finish on this. Brilliant finishes is one of our core values. When they're discussing a difficult project, when they'll say to each other, we need a brilliant finish on this. Or they'll say, you know what, 100% delivery. If that's in the proposal, we have to deliver it. And they don't have to come to me to say, wait a minute, we've done all this extra work, but we haven't done this thing. You know, should we do this thing? Well, like, what does our core value say? It says 100% delivery. So if you can have a place like that and you make $100,000 less than you could have made, what difference does it make? This is our life. Like, this is what we're doing. It's what we're doing every day.
You're talking about legacy.
Yes. I'm talking about legacy, developing people, and living and enjoying every day that you're here, doing work that you're proud of, so that when you go to dinner, you know, in Nashville, Tennessee, and run into one of your clients, you don't have to hide. You know, it just, I feel that every single day. We filled our office space with artwork. The day it was opened, it was full of artwork because I'm a finisher by nature. I'm not a perfectionist, but I am a finisher. And I thought, you know what, we could buy one piece of art a year out of the profits of the company, you know, and have this office finished in 10 years' time.
Slowly get it done.
Or we could do it now and enjoy it every day. And that's just, you know, that's just a very small expression of how I feel about working with the people that I work with. We're not going to have clients that we don't enjoy working with.
That's good.
We resign them if they are, there is too much business out there, and our people are way too important for me to put them to work with people who disrespect them and disrespect the product that we're trying to create. You know, who don't use us for the thing that we're used best for. You know, if you want if you want us to be an order taker, like, you need to go work with somebody else. If you want strategic leadership, if you want somebody who really cares about the end result and who will advise you when that's a bad idea, you know, not all ideas are good ideas. You know, then you can work with us. But if you want us to just take your order and fill it, it's just not. It doesn't do anything for us.
What you just described, doing the work on your culture up front, being resolute on your culture along the way, produces so much more clarity along the way. I mean, that's what I feel like you just said.
It does. It absolutely is a great way to put it. It does, because when it's so easy to tell when somebody is not living up to our core values. It's so easy to see when somebody doesn't fit the culture. And when everybody is bought into that culture, then I'm not having to police the culture.
You bet.
I don't have to. It polices itself.
You bet.
And I promise you, if there's a culture violation, if there was a culture flag to throw, there's 30 people who would throw it before I would, because they see it first.
And that's what you want.
It is what you want.
You talked about that point and the point you made about hearing your people use terms, philosophies. I've said it forever. Parenting children and leading adults are very similar.
They sure are.
There is nothing more rewarding than hearing your child leverage a philosophy you've been teaching them for their success.
That's right.
Likewise.
When they've integrated it, if they're repeating it, it means that they have listened to it, they have integrated it into their way of thinking and behaving and their way of making decisions.
That's good.
And that is what you want, because otherwise you're wasting time.
Right.
You know? And when you see people acting counter of that, you got to get rid of them sooner rather than later. And that is a hard thing to do in a small company. You know, it is hard to do. You've got to watch out for subversive cultures. People can build a culture inside a culture.
That's right.
They can take one or two of the core values or the culture pieces that feed their ego or solve a problem for them, and they can build a culture inside your culture. And sometimes those people are very high performers, and so it's hard for you to let go.
That's
right. But you have to let go. You have to, because they are sitting on other people and not even allowing them to breathe. And it is hard to do that.
We see that a lot in companies where we work, that type A, that achiever, that person who is getting the results. They're often the persons who have sometimes they don't even do it intentionally.
Right.
It happens as a byproduct of them trying to get things done.
Right.
So that notion that you just shared about, you have to always, we do a program called Keepers of the Culture. You have to always be looking to make sure that is the culture intact, because what a lot of CEOs and leaders seem to not understand is that once your culture shifts in the wrong direction, your profitability is soon to follow.
It's soon to follow. That's exactly right. And we have, I've had that happen before, and it's painful. I think that's why the clarity behind the job descriptions, which mine says number one is grow and mentor the VP team. That's what it is. Their number one is grow and mentor the directors, and their number one is grow and mentor the team. So that is your kind of your watchdog. You know, if I am in touch with, if the VPs are really on the same page with me, not just financially, but culture-wise, and every strategic initiative, if they are on the same page with me, they will. They'll be the ones that drive that through the directors, and they will drive that through the team. And that is the only way that you can watchdog your culture. You know, because I can't be in touch with everybody every day.
Exactly.
There's 30 of them, and we have a lot of business, and we're busy, and it's not my job to see, it's their job. And that giving them that responsibility is what develops them. It's what respects them as an individual. It's what treats them with dignity. You know, what you don't want is to give somebody responsibility without authority. You know,
right.
You know, you can't do that. And if you want to keep high performers, you have to give them increasing levels of responsibility. So that's how you know, though, if somebody has created a culture inside a culture. If I'm really inside but the heads of my VPs and they really know the directors,
right.
that is the only way. When you find yourself, and I've been guilty of this, when you find yourself going, I'm going to I just can't deal with that.
Yes.
Like there is only so much time in a day, and you do have to have high performers, even for short periods of time, even if they are, kind of stepping outside the lines.
Right.
Because you can't dismantle everything that makes a business run. But when I find myself not wanting to confront something, when I keep turning away from it, I know that I need to turn toward it.
Right.
And face it. There is something wrong.
That's a sign.
It's a sign.
I talked to you about this notion of a book. And just for what it's worth, I sort of like Brilliant Finishes as a title.
Really?
That seems like a real capstone for what you've described in your career and even in your life, even the story you told when we were sort of off camera.
Yeah.
But, it might be something to consider. Well, I just want to say to you, I really have enjoyed talking with you. It's always exciting for me to talk with people who get it. Talk with people who understand the importance of culture, who understand the CEO, the leader's role in making culture live and be vibrant. So I just want to say thanks for joining us on the C-Seat today.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You bet. Thanks a lot.